My husband's daughter smirked and said, "She's always hated me after lying about me. He threw me out that night without asking my side. But when he begged me back weeks later, I handed him divorce papers. I felt my world tilt on its axis as those venomous words slithered from Maya's mouth. She was 23, old enough to know exactly what destruction she was unleashing, yet young enough to believe she could manipulate her way out of any consequences. The smirk on her face told me everything I needed to know about her intentions. This wasn't some misunderstanding or emotional outburst. This was calculated warfare, and I had just become her primary target. "What exactly did I do to always hate you?" I asked, my voice steady despite the earthquake happening inside my chest. But Maya just shrugged, that infuriating little gesture that said she didn't need to explain herself to someone she considered beneath her notice. My husband David stood there like a statue, his face already hardening into the expression I recognized from his worst business dealings. Cold, final, unforgiving. In that moment, I realized that my marriage had just become a hostile takeover, and somehow I hadn't seen it coming until the final signature was being forged. "Pack your things," he said, his voice carrying the same tone he used to fire employees. "I can't have this kind of toxicity in my house." The words hit me like physical blows. Toxicity. In his house. Not our house. His house. 7 years of marriage reduced to a real estate transaction where I had suddenly lost all ownership rights. I packed in mechanical silence, each folded sweater and rolled pair of socks, feeling like evidence of a life I was being forced to abandon. Maya watched from the doorway, no longer bothering to hide her triumphant satisfaction. She had won something tonight, though I wasn't entirely sure what game we had been playing. As I wheeled my suitcase toward the front door, something crystallized in my mind. This wasn't just about whatever lie Maya had told. This was about power, control, and the systematic dismantling of everything I had built. But Maya and David had made one critical miscalculation. They assumed I was powerless, simply because I had been blindsided. They were about to learn otherwise. The first week at my friend Rebecca's house gave me time to process what had actually happened and, more importantly, to assess my strategic position. Rebecca, a litigation attorney who specialized in complex divorce cases, poured us both wine while I explained the situation. "So let me get this straight," she said, reviewing the notes she'd been taking. "You co-founded his consulting business 7 years ago. You're listed as a partner on the LLC paperwork. You contributed the initial capital from your inheritance, and you've been managing all the financial operations while he handled client relations." "That's correct." "And the house was purchased with funds from your joint account, with both names on the mortgage and deed." I nodded, beginning to see where her legal mind was heading. "Maya isn't his biological daughter, right? She's from his first marriage, but you've been contributing to her college expenses and living costs." "I've been paying her rent for the past 2 years while she found herself after graduation," I confirmed, feeling stupid for the first time about my generosity. Rebecca leaned back in her chair, a slow smile spreading across her face. "Alina, do you realize what kind of financial leverage you actually have here?" Over the next 3 days, Rebecca helped me conduct a comprehensive audit of my position. The picture that emerged was far more favorable than I had initially realized. Our consulting business, which specialized in organizational restructuring for Fortune 500 companies, had grown from a 2-person operation to a 15-employee firm generating $2 to million annually. My role hadn't been peripheral. I had built and managed the entire operational infrastructure that allowed David to focus on client acquisition and delivery. More importantly, I discovered that my name appeared on significantly more legal documents than I had consciously remembered. The business banking account, the equipment leases, the office lease, the professional liability insurance policy, even the contracts with our 3 biggest clients contained my signature as a business partner, not just as David's spouse. He can't simply erase you from this business, Rebecca explained. You're not an employee who can be terminated. You're a legal partner with fiduciary rights and profit-sharing entitlements. But the real revelation came when we discovered David's financial vulnerabilities. His first divorce had been expensive, leaving him with significant alimony obligations that would continue for 3 more years. The business expansion he had pushed for last year had been financed through a commercial loan that required both our personal guarantees. His investment portfolio, which he managed independently, had taken substantial losses in the recent market volatility. In essence, David needed my financial stability more than I needed his business connections. "What about Maya?" I asked. Rebecca's expression turned predatory. "Maya is a whole different kind of problem for them. She's been receiving what amounts to spousal support from you through David, but she has no legal claim to any marital assets. If David's income gets disrupted through divorce proceedings, she's going to find herself financially cut off." The strategic landscape was becoming clearer. David thought he could simply discard me and continue operating as if I had never existed. Maya thought she could eliminate me as competition for her father's attention and resources. Neither of them had considered that I might fight back with the same ruthless calculation they had used against me. By the end of the week, I had developed a comprehensive counterattack strategy. I started with the business operations. As a legal partner, I had the right to access all financial records, client communications, and operational systems. I also had the authority to make certain business decisions without David's consent, particularly regarding day-to-day operations and vendor relationships. Monday morning, I used my administrative access to download 7 years of financial records, client contracts, and internal communications. Everything was properly backed up to cloud storage that only I controlled. Then I scheduled individual meetings with our 3 largest clients to discuss upcoming organizational changes that might affect service delivery. The conversations were enlightening. Our clients weren't just purchasing David's consulting expertise. They were buying access to the comprehensive analytical frameworks and implementation systems I had developed. Several mentioned that they considered me the operational genius behind our success and were concerned about service continuity if there were personnel changes. I want to assure you that my commitment to delivering exceptional results remains unchanged, I told each client. However, there may be some structural modifications to our service delivery model in the coming months. I'll personally ensure that your projects remain on track regardless of any internal transitions. I was building client loyalty and confidence in my continued involvement while subtly undermining their confidence in David's ability to deliver comparable results independently. Next, I consulted with Marcus Blackwood, a forensic accountant who specialized in business valuation for divorce proceedings. Marcus had worked with Rebecca on several complex cases and came highly recommended for his ability to uncover hidden assets and establish accurate business valuations. "I need you to determine the exact value of my stake in this business and identify any financial irregularities that might affect asset division," I explained during our initial consultation. Marcus spent 3 days reviewing the financial records I had compiled. His findings were even more favorable than I had hoped. "Your contributions to this business go far beyond the initial capital investment," he explained. "You've been functioning as the Chief Operating Officer, Chief Financial Officer, and Client Success Manager simultaneously. The systems you built are generating approximately 65% of the business value." More interesting were the irregularities he discovered. David had been treating certain business expenses as personal expenses, effectively using company funds for non-business purposes. He had also been inconsistent in reporting income across different financial statements, which could create complications with both the IRS and our commercial lender. "These aren't necessarily criminal violations," Marcus clarified, "but they do suggest financial management issues that could be problematic if scrutinized during divorce proceedings." My third strategic consultation was with Patricia Vance, a private investigator who specialized in asset discovery and personal conduct investigations. I wasn't looking to prove infidelity or other marital misconduct, but I wanted a comprehensive understanding of David's financial situation and spending patterns. Patricia's investigation revealed several concerning details about David's recent activities. He'd been spending significant amounts at high-end restaurants and entertainment venues, often on evenings when he claimed to be working late. More importantly, he had been consistently overspending relative to his income, relying on business profits to subsidize a lifestyle that wasn't sustainable without my financial contributions. He's been living beyond his means for at least 18 months, Patricia reported. The business income has been masking some serious personal financial management issues. The final piece of my strategic preparation involved securing my personal financial position. I opened individual banking accounts, transferred my personal assets to accounts that David couldn't access, and established credit lines that didn't depend on our joint financial history. I also purchased a small condo in my name only, ensuring that I would have stable housing regardless of how property division was resolved. 3 weeks after being thrown out of what I had considered my home, I was ready to respond to David's inevitable attempt to reconcile. He showed up at Rebecca's house on a Thursday evening, looking haggard and uncertain in a way I had never seen before. His usual confidence had been replaced by something that looked disturbingly like desperation. "Alina, we need to talk," he said. "I think I may have overreacted. Maya was upset about something, and maybe I didn't handle the situation properly." The non-apology was exactly what I had expected. No acknowledgement of wrongdoing, no acceptance of responsibility, just a vague suggestion that he might have overreacted to his daughter's accusations. "What exactly did Maya tell you that made you believe I needed to be immediately removed from our home?" I asked. David shifted uncomfortably. "She said there had been some confrontations between you two, some hostile interactions that were making her uncomfortable living there. And you believe these alleged confrontations were serious enough to end our marriage without asking for my perspective or any supporting evidence?" "She's my daughter, Alina. When she tells me she feels unsafe, I have to take that seriously." The conversation continued in predictable circles for another 20 minutes. David wanted me to acknowledge that Maya's feelings were valid, apologize for whatever unspecified hostility I had allegedly displayed, and return home so we could work things out as a family. I let him finish his entire reconciliation speech before I responded. "Actually, David, I did some reflecting while I was staying here," I said, retrieving the envelope I had prepared. "I reflected on 7 years of marriage, on the business we built together, on the financial investments I made in our shared future, and on the way you threw all of that away because Maya told you some story you refused to even specify." His face went pale as he opened the envelope and saw the divorce papers. "This is ridiculous," he said, but his voice cracked slightly. "You're upset. I understand that, but we don't need lawyers and courts. We can handle this ourselves." "The way you handled Maya's accusations, with careful consideration and thorough investigation?" I asked. "I don't think your decision-making process is as reliable as you believe." That's when Maya appeared behind him, right on schedule. I had expected her to accompany him once she realized that their plan to reconcile and restore the status quo wasn't proceeding smoothly. "Good," she said, not bothering to hide her satisfaction. "Finally, she's leaving for good. Dad, you don't need her dragging you down anymore." But something had shifted in David's expression as he looked at his daughter. For the first time, he seemed to be actually hearing the venom in her voice instead of interpreting it as justified protective instincts. "Maya, that's not helpful right now," he said. "Why not? She never belonged in our family anyway. She was always trying to come between us, always acting like she had some claim on you that was more important than your own daughter." I watched David's face carefully as Maya continued talking. He was finally seeing what I had been seeing for years: the possessive jealousy, the sense of entitlement, the complete lack of empathy for anyone who threatened her position as the center of his universe. "You'll regret this," I said quietly, looking directly at both of them. Then I closed the door. But they had no idea that the regret was about to become a comprehensive financial and personal catastrophe that would reshape both their lives permanently. The divorce proceedings began exactly as I had planned. My legal team, led by Rebecca and supported by Marcus's forensic accounting analysis, filed for dissolution of marriage with a comprehensive asset division claim that shocked David's attorney. David had apparently expected a simple division of obvious marital property: house, cars, savings accounts. Instead, he found himself facing a detailed analysis of the business value, including my ownership stake, profit-sharing entitlements, and compensation for 7 years of unpaid executive-level labor. "Your client seems to have misunderstood her role in the business," David's attorney suggested during our first mediation session. "On the contrary," Rebecca responded. "Our forensic analysis indicates that Ms. Alina has been functioning as the de facto chief operating officer while being compensated at approximately 30% of market rate for comparable positions. We're seeking both fair asset division and compensation for years of undervalued contributions." The business valuation alone was devastating for David's position. Marcus had determined that my operational systems and client relationships represented approximately $1 million in business value. My initial capital contribution, with reasonable investment returns, was now worth approximately $340,000. My unpaid labor, calculated at market rates for similar positions, totaled nearly $280,000 in compensation differential. David's attorney clearly hadn't prepared for this level of financial sophistication. They had expected an emotional spouse seeking revenge, not a business partner seeking fair compensation for documented contributions. But the real damage was still accumulating behind the scenes. The client meetings I had conducted were producing their intended results. 2 of our 3 major clients had expressed concerns about service continuity and were requesting contract modifications that would guarantee my continued involvement in their projects. The 3rd client had actually terminated their contract, stating that they had primarily valued my analytical capabilities and weren't confident in David's ability to deliver comparable results independently. David's business income had dropped by approximately 40% within 6 weeks of my departure. Meanwhile, he still had all the same operational expenses, plus the additional costs of hiring temporary contractors to handle the work I had been managing. Maya was experiencing her own financial pressures. David's reduced income meant he could no longer subsidize her lifestyle at previous levels. Her rent checks started bouncing, her credit cards were reaching their limits, and she was being forced to confront the reality that her comfortable post-graduation existence had been funded by the woman she had worked so systematically to eliminate. The psychological pressure was clearly mounting. David started sending increasingly desperate text messages suggesting we could work out a partnership arrangement that would allow me to continue managing business operations while we sorted out our personal differences. Maya was posting increasingly bitter social media rants about gold-digging women who manipulate successful men, but I maintained complete professional silence. Every communication went through Rebecca. Every business decision was documented and legally compliant. Every financial move was strategic and defensible. The turning point came during David's deposition. Under oath, he was forced to acknowledge the full scope of my business contributions and the financial impact of my departure. He also had to explain his decision-making process regarding Maya's accusations and his failure to investigate or seek my perspective before demanding I leave our home. "Did you ask your wife for her version of the events your daughter described?" Rebecca asked. "No, but Maya was clearly upset, and I felt I needed to prioritize her emotional well-being." Did you consider that your wife might also be upset about being accused of unspecified hostile behavior? I assumed if she was innocent, she would understand why I needed to take Maya's concerns seriously. So your assumption was that an innocent person would accept being removed from their home and marriage without any investigation or due process. David's attorney objected, but the damage was already recorded in the official transcript. The final settlement hearing lasted less than 2 hours. The judge reviewed our documentation, listened to both sides' arguments, and issued a ruling that exceeded even my most optimistic projections. I was awarded 55% of the business value, recognition of my capital contributions, with accrued interest, and a lump sum payment for unpaid labor. The house was ordered sold with proceeds divided equally. David was responsible for all legal fees and court costs. More importantly, the judge's ruling established legal precedent for my continued involvement in business operations, effectively making it impossible for David to exclude me from client relationships or operational decisions without my consent. The total financial impact was approximately $1 million in immediate assets, plus ongoing business income that would continue as long as I remained involved in operations. David sat in stunned silence as the judge read the ruling. Maya, who had attended every hearing with increasingly obvious anxiety, actually started crying when she realized the full implications for their financial situation. Outside the courthouse, she made one final attempt to salvage something from the wreckage of her manipulation. "You destroyed him," she hissed. "He's going to lose everything because of your vindictive legal games." "No," I replied calmly. "He destroyed himself when he chose to believe your lies without investigation. You just helped him do it more efficiently." Her face crumpled, and for the first time, she looked like what she actually was, a young woman who had overestimated her own power and underestimated the consequences of destroying other people's lives. The aftermath unfolded exactly as my strategic analysis had predicted. David was forced to sell the house to meet the settlement obligations. His business income, reduced by client losses and operational inefficiencies, couldn't support his previous lifestyle. He moved into a smaller apartment and began rebuilding his professional reputation from a significantly weaker position. Maya found herself completely cut off from the financial support she had taken for granted. Her father could no longer afford to subsidize her lifestyle, and she was forced to take an entry-level job that actually required consistent work performance. The comfortable post-graduation period of self-discovery was abruptly terminated by economic reality. The business relationships I had cultivated during the divorce proceedings led to consultation opportunities with 3 new major clients. My reputation for sophisticated operational analysis had attracted attention from competitors who were eager to recruit someone with my track record. Within 6 months, I had established my own consulting firm specializing in organizational restructuring and operational optimization. A year later, my new firm had generated more revenue than David's original business had ever produced. Maya eventually reached out through a mutual acquaintance, apparently hoping to apologize and rebuild some kind of relationship, but I didn't respond. David's attorney contacted Rebecca 18 months later to inquire whether I might be interested in a business partnership arrangement, but I declined politely but definitively. I had built something better than what we had shared, and I had no interest in recreating a professional relationship with someone who had demonstrated such poor judgment in personal relationships.